Hello and welcome to Adventures in Venueland, an EAMC podcast. This is your all-access pass to go backstage and behind the scenes with some of the brightest minds that cross the scope of the live entertainment industry. I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. We'll introduce you to some of our favorite people as we dive deep into the world of live touring shows and the venues that host them.
Our adventure today takes us to Los Angeles, where our guest, originally from Oklahoma City, is a music photographer based in LA, specializing in tour content creation. She's toured for the last 7 years with artists in the alt rock pop categories, everything from small clubs to stadium, photo, video, social content, really focused on growing artists' visual presence on and off the road. So kind of a different kind of adventure that I'm excited to hear about. Anna Lee, welcome to the broadcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So you are kind of self-known, at least on your website, as the girl with blue hair.
True. Yes, it's something I've carried on almost since the beginning of touring. So just a helpful identifier at this point.
So now do you feel obligated? Do you feel like, I know like an artist sometimes feels like they can't change their look up in the middle of a tour. Do you feel obligated to keep the blue hair because it's such a part of your identity on the road?
No, I think if I get tired of it, I'll, just change the wording on the website. But I have found, funny enough, that it's actually very functional on tour because I deal with a lot of people that, meeting for the first time, and especially in like a dark room and security and things like that. And it's an easy way for people to remember that, like, I've been through the access points before. And so it's funny. It's something I've discovered, a way that it comes in handy.
So many of us on the arena side are just, so locked into cameras, right? So we see anybody with a camera anywhere that we're not escorting somewhere, and we got an eye out for trouble. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you've been approached by more than a few venue folks to say, hey, who are you and what are you doing here over the time? And so it has to be quite different to see it from your side of things.
Yeah. And it's, everybody's there to do a job, and we're very thankful for the security and all the help that they provide. But it's really great to kind of like establish those connections and put a face to the job when you first arrive. So in that way, blue hair helps me.
Let's talk 2022 because, here we are, kind of, I know you mentioned it recording, kind of mentioned it being the second wave. It feels like the 16th wave to me, but it's the second wave of, big impact. Tell me where you're at today and kind of how things are going for you.
Yeah, well, I guess second wave in that, like, things were fully planned and booked to go ahead and are now being canceled, like, across the board. Whereas previously things just weren't being planned at all, just out of caution. So yeah, where I'm at right now is kind of just waiting to see how everything shakes out. Like many other of my touring peers and colleagues and friends, we had plans for the spring, and now everything is kind of like getting not fully canceled mostly, but kind of postponed indefinitely. And at this point, we're better at kind of just like rolling with the punches and the disappointments, and just kind of like, we're more agile and more flexible than maybe we were in 2020, and understanding of the situation, because what are you going to do?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I was going to ask is, do you feel like you're in a much better place than you were 2 years ago, just because so much of that caught everyone off guard, and then no one knew what the worst case scenario could look like. And I think we all kind of know what that looks like now. So I think it hopefully instills a little bit more comfort and flexibility, knowing that, there will be an end, and, you just have to kind of stay flexible and ride out, the wave.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of hits on a personal level, right? So it's like, you don't really know logistically what's going to happen, but just mentally and personally, you know that this whole thing has ups and downs. It's a roller coaster. So you kind of just have to like ride it out till we start gaining traction again. And yeah, like you said, we have seen the best and the worst of it. So we know what to expect. It's not ideal, but at least I think there's just a lot to be said for knowing how to deal with it when it happens.
Anna, walk me through what the past, 2 years have been like for you, from that time when everything's firing on all cylinders and you're there to kind of, this scary moment where as a photojournalist of live events, those events disappear, and kind of how you made your way through this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's been nothing if not very interesting. So I had a unique perspective on the beginning of all of this unfolding because I was in the middle of like a tour in Eastern Europe when
Oh, wow.
like the official, I mean, who knows when it all kind of started really unfolding in what countries, but there was definitely like the marked day in the US is, mid-March when everything kind of officially was being reined in and like shut down. So that was it was just bizarre because, at the time it kind of felt a bit like overkill and it felt like a little dramatic, the measures that were being taken. Obviously in hindsight, it's like we didn't leave soon enough.
Right.
But yeah, so I was on tour with ex-ambassadors and it was just a full-on international tour. And we were lucky in that we almost made it to the end. We got to hit all of our cities and our countries. I think we lost a week off the end in Eastern Europe. So it was just to be sitting in an airport in Lithuania on like March 13th to go home, like kind of people were wearing masks and we're all just like, should we? Do we need to? Like, yeah, I guess we probably should, but like also what's happening, how long? It's gonna be a couple of weeks. So yeah, it was just bizarre. So that was the beginning of that whole period. So, we go home thinking we're just gonna wait this out for a few weeks and see what happens.
Right,
And then,
right.
As we all know, the weeks and months piled on and then a year later we're kind of still in the same place. But so through that period, there was so many different paths one could take, especially like freelancers, as far as like, do I try to find a different hustle or like, how do I fill my time? How do I make this work? And if you're in the very fortunate and privileged position where you're not like completely strapped for money and just trying to survive, because I know that was the situation for a lot of people, you're kind of left trying to figure out what to do with your time. And as a freelance creative contractor, you feel this pressure to like reinvent yourself, I guess, in the context of the
Sure.
world as it is now, just not really knowing like, am I going to have my old thing back? So
Yeah.
I did a few auxiliary experimental things, just kind of played around with different creative ideas. But ultimately, I kind of just decided to like take the year off to the degree that I could afford to do so because the burnout was getting real. And I think you just have to really embrace those opportunities for downtime because it's something that as freelance creatives we are so bad at. So I spent a good amount of time back home in Oklahoma with my family, actually, just kind of spending time reconnecting with them and just like really resting. And to that end, it was very productive for me. And then kind of fast forward to mid 2021 when things started picking back up again, I was incredibly fortunate to be able to participate in some of like the first tours that were like able to go back out safely. If you remember, we had that like sweet spot in the middle of summer where it's like, okay,
Yes,
most of us are
yes.
vaccinated now and there's no variants yet. And there was like that window of just like, everything's fine. We're back to normal.
Oh, that was a good day. That was a
Yeah,
good day.
it was a good couple of weeks. So yeah, I was on a tour during that time with Fits and the Tantrums, and those tours rolled right into my fall tour with Walk the Moon, which incidentally was the last one that I did. So it was a great like kind of summer, fall, early winter that felt more or less back to normal outside of the new protocols that we had in place. But yeah, so to answer your question, that's my last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you had that perspective of enjoying the space. Like we have some of our previous guests talked about that. Actually, our editor and one of our previous guests, she was a touring violinist that toured with some people, and she kind of thought the same perspective. It was sort of like, I'm getting burnout a little bit on the road. Normally I feel like I wouldn't have some of that space to take the break. And although it's not what I expected or wanted, how can I take advantage of this opportunity? And I think even people that worked at venues or other people in the industry often are just so run and gun onto the next event, the next event, the next event, that sort of having some of that time to like be at home, whether it's spending time with your family or gardening or whatever it was, hobbies, I know I tried to take advantage of as well. But I do think, hopefully people kind of saw that perspective of this industry as a whole is you know, so apt for burning out, that I think if we are afforded the time off, whether we want it or not, we should really take full advantage and soak it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, if I can use a very honest word towards that, I would say it can get really toxic if you don't learn how to advocate for yourself. Most people learned a lot about that and about themselves kind of in this downtime, taking that time to reset and realize like how hard do I want to go, and like where can I set some healthy boundaries, and also learning that like the world goes on if I'm not able to be on tour. And I was one of those people
Yeah.
that's just like, I was addicted to be on the road, like one tour to another, like pack my calendar as much as possible. And also just kind of feeling the pressure of like, to continue to make it in this career, you have to be like on it all the time, just like filling in every gap. So yeah, it was like such a good personal reset. And I've totally approached the reopening and like getting back to the careers with a different mindset about like, actually considering like how I'm taking care of myself with all of that too. So yeah, there was a lot to be learned in that space.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, yeah, setting those boundaries. I think so many of us hopped on the train and just kept riding it, clinging onto the side, hoping we didn't fall off. And then when that train stopped, there was that great opportunity to reset who we are and how much we want our job to define us and our life, and kind of setting some of those boundaries. And so here you are, finally, when you get that chance to get back out and shoot shows, what was that feeling like that very first show you got to shoot again with a crowd?
Oh, it was just so strange. On one hand, it felt like, you know, nothing had changed and I was just doing this yesterday. And on the other hand, it was incredibly emotional, which is so funny. So the first show I actually got to shoot was a little bit before those tours, even. It was like post vaccines, like by a couple of months, but it was like a college show that I did with a band that I toured with for a long time. They're just like old friends of mine. And so they were actually playing close to where I was back at home. While I was just kind of hanging out there. And I was like, oh, I'll just come through and like be at a show. Like, this is crazy. And just hang out with, like, see some friends. And kind of went into it with more of like just a casual recreational mindset, and was very taken aback by the emotional response that not only I had, but like the guys in the band had, and like our little tiny crew that we had with us, and just people that were very, they've been around the block. They've done this for years and years. It's nothing new to them, but just this, it created this novelty for everyone that we had never really experienced before. And to kind of be there experiencing that all together and with people that I'm so close with, like old tour homies. It was incredibly emotional. It was just like a one-off, little fly date for them, but it was cool. It was really special to experience that together. And then because of that, and then also just kind of being like on the very, very first wave of tours that were getting back out, I was witnessing so many different people's first time back. And so that was
Sure.
really, really cool and really special to kind of like get to see people experience that novelty like over and over again. And so seeing that from the bands and the artists and the crews, they quickly kind of got back into the groove of it. But even like well into the fall, when I was on tour with Walk the Moon through September and October, most of the people attending those shows, it was like their first time to come back to a show. So we were seeing it like night after night. And I made a point to like talk to fans that would come to the show and just kind of like gauge where they were at. And it's just like over and over again, I heard like, yeah, this is my first show back. And just everybody was in tears, so emotional. A lot of people are in tears that Walk the Moon shows anyway, because their fans are so committed. And it's really special to see. But it was cool to get to watch that unfold.
Really cathartic. Yeah.
Yeah. Like satisfying in a way that just feels like, yeah, we've all earned this feeling after the bullshit of the last like year
Yes.
and a half.
Yeah. I remember my first show shooting because I previously worked at an arena and did all of their house photos, as well as like a theater and this convention center, and then also did some freelancing on the side, nothing touring, but shot for like the regional iHeart station and other stuff. And so not only did I lose my job ultimately, but I also, all the live music dried up, so I wasn't shooting any photos. And so I remember my first show back was this like one-off that the local iHeart station did. And it was using the arena, but it was like 25% capacity, mask required, spaced everyone out. So I was going back to the arena that I'd worked at, but no longer working there, but then shooting photos and having this like return to live music photography. And it was kind of like you described, really strange and kind of awkward initially. And as soon as I got like in the pit shooting photos, it was so cathartic. Like you mentioned, like this, I don't think I cried, but it was like this emotional, like hug from someone.
Yeah.
It was like, you're back to this live music and you have your cameras and it was almost this weird, even though we weren't fully back to normal, it just felt like the biggest jump back to normal that I had experienced at any given one time. It was so, I don't know. It's so I can only imagine seeing that with fans, but I'm right there with you when it was, shooting a show is just really wild.
Yeah, there's that like personal individual experience of emotion, but there's also just this universal, like unprecedented universal solidarity with everyone in the room, which we would have had no other reason to ever experience that had we not experienced this entire thing together. So it's like you just all get in that room together, and all that matters is that you're all there and you're back, and it's very cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, being addicted to touring pre-pandemic. So what is it you love so much about being on tour? Because I think that's something that a lot of people listening to this podcast have thought about. Oh, could I go on the road with a band? Would I enjoy that? Would it get old? What do you love most about what would cause you to be addicted to touring?
Yeah, man, it's kind of a tough thing to pin down, and it's certainly not for everyone. I know people that are thinking about it. And it's funny to have those conversations with people. They're just like, yeah, I'm thinking about maybe trying touring. And I'm just like, well, if you're just thinking about it, like, I don't know if you're not already obsessed with the idea, like, I don't know if you're going to like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of fun. Yeah. You either love it or you hate it, I feel like, which is also relative to like your experience, right? It's like you kind of either have to do it all the time to like maintain those opportunities, or you just kind of fall out of it. I mean, I'm sure there's a middle ground. I don't know about it if it's there, but yeah, anyway. So I guess one kind of perspective I like to take on it for me personally is I'm incredibly introverted, not shy, but introverted. And so I'm drawn to situations where I have very close, intimate relationships with a small handful of people, and people that I can just like build relationships with over a long term and kind of like go deep with them and have significant experiences together. And that's literally the definition of being on tour. So I do a lot of work locally in LA too, which is fun, but I find that to be incredibly draining sometimes in a different way than touring is. Touring is obviously very physically demanding. It's incredibly taxing, like on your body and your mind. But the reward for me is working towards a common goal with a small set of people and doing it every day. And it's kind of like this expedited track to like best friendship. And even though it often doesn't extend beyond the tour. Like, there's certain people that you bond with and you keep in touch with beyond that, which is great. I have so many amazing friendships out of that. But like when you're inside the bubble of the tour, and during COVID touring, it's a literal bubble. You only have each other. It's like a fast track to extreme bonding with people. And my soul just thrives on that. And so that whole environment compounded with the fact that I'm getting to do what I consider like the most fun job in the world, and something that felt like such a mountain to mount to get there to where I'm doing this consistently. So it's just like extreme gratitude and just like so much fun, and this environment of like really special relationships. And I know everybody calls it a family, but that's really the best term for it, in the best case scenario, like assuming that you're like in a really good touring fit with the people that you work with, which are the people that I tend to work with residually and over the years.
Do you kind of parlay certain relationships with certain bands into other ones because you've met them while on tour, or you've heard, or what's the code, like the Nashville code that we heard, Dave? But it's something like there's 3 rules in Nashville, and it's like show up, be on time, and be a good hang, or something like that. And it's something to that effect. But it's basically like, once you find a good group of people, do you just kind of like parlay that into the next band that you also know is like-minded and good group to kind of avoid any sort of toxic or poisonous touring experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. It is all connected on that level, and just on the level of getting the gigs in the first place. It's such a referral based industry, of course. So yes, they all kind of snowball into each other. And I owe most of my gig connections to that just kind of like overlap of a couple of people that referred me for this or that, or, we're on a tour and one of the other bands on the bill then would take me out at a later time. So yeah, just a lot of overlap in that way. But yeah, I can't remember what the handful of tenets are that you mentioned, but it is so much about personality, or like being a good hang, as you put it, because what's funny and what I realize is that you don't have to be like the absolute best at your craft or in your industry to work in touring. I mean, obviously they want people that are really skilled at what they do, and really creative, but the more important currency is personality, and just like your ability to fit with certain people. And like you may fit better with one artist than another, but because referrals are the main form of transportation around the touring industry, people are far more likely to pass your name around if they trust you, and if they know that you have a certain level of professionalism and just ability to interact with other people over like, at a certain point, there's just like lateral moves between skill sets. And
Sure.
It's more about how are you going to fit in with the team. So that's been an interesting thing to learn over the years, and something that is like something that I've guarded very preciously is just like my relationships and my reputation with other people, and just like making sure that no matter what, like I show up for people and like get the work done and just try to be reliable.
Let me ask you a question, and I mean this, to be not to be offensive, but for 20 years I went to concerts and there were no pictures. Right, I took no pictures, no cameras were allowed in, and maybe there was a photographer there with a tour who would end up in a book someday. Now we're in a situation where at a Walk the Moon show, every single person there has a camera. Mm-hmm. They're all taking pictures. They're all taking high def video. What is the role? What is the need for a great rock photographer these days?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing that I've unpacked myself over the years. And I feel like I've been fortunate to kind of watch the unfolding of what you're referring to, because having started doing this about 7 or 8 years ago, even when I started, it was still not incredibly common, or it wasn't like it wasn't like built into the needs of a tour. So I still kind of had to justify
Yeah, sure.
and kind of sell how I could contribute. And I think as the need for content became more ubiquitous with like the explosion of social media and specifically
Sure.
Instagram, this had two significant implications for me. And it was that like bands very rapidly realized the need for like a high volume of content, and also that it was easier than ever to like share and discover music photography and the music itself even, and that kind of became a necessity for artists to be able to, you know, compete for the attention of music listeners, and so just adding in this visual component to fill out the band's presence or like their existence, which is kind of like seems superfluous if you like really get into the weeds thinking about it, but as a visual content creator, it's like a really exciting era of getting to participate in the process of like what an artist is and like how they present themselves to other people. But I am so fascinated by the tour photographers or the music. I don't even know if we would call them tour photographers because it wasn't like an ongoing gig, you know, decades in the past. I'm so fascinated by that. And I think it's incredibly special what they had, just that like it wasn't built into the needs of the band. So their access was more intentional, maybe,
Yeah,
or
sure.
more because they were capturing like special, really iconic moments and not just there to create like volume for just constant visual output like we are now. So obviously the need for it has evolved a lot. And I am personally thankful that it has created so many opportunities for visual creators to be a part of that process. But there's something incredibly special about like those periods of time where like if you were there capturing photos of those moments, it was, yeah, it probably would end up in a book because it was so much more rare and there was, I think, so much more equity in those individual moments.
Yeah.
I know it's a big question, but that was a great answer.
Thanks.
You're exactly right. If you go back and look at some of these photos from like a photographer like Jim Marshall or someone who was like in the room with these bands, there's no other photographers around. This person's, you know, maybe only shooting, they're not necessarily touring. They might shoot like one night at Madison Square Garden for like some big act. And that's like the only photos of in existence of that experience. And you're right, it had to be like intentional. And I think it was so also relationship, you know, because these artists were not as like seeing it as a means to a marketing end, and more so of just like, I want to invite you in to tell my story and to be vulnerable. And that was rare. You know,
Yeah.
no one wanted to show vulnerability. And I think now you're right, it's kind of become a little bit of just like part of the marketing playbook, but it was extremely rare back then. And I think now, although they serve, you know, touring photographers maybe serve a little bit of a different role, they're just as important to kind of visually tell that story. And I would say too that is probably the big separator from like the fan in the crowd with a really nice camera and the person, you know, in front of the stage, is they know what story that band wants to tell. And to credit you, like if, you know, people go look at your Instagram and look back through your various tours, you know, the quality is kind of universally there, but you do a really good job of, you know, whether it's looking at Walk the Moon and comparing it to your photos of the Struts, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
there is a styling there kind of that is woven throughout each of those that I think is, you know, a credit to your ability to kind of pick up on what that band is emoting and what kind of vibe they're putting off, what kind of, you know, look they want. And I think, you know, only someone that has that close, tight relationship with the band would really be able to reflect that and put that out in that form.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It means a lot. Like that people, you know, for any creative can look at somebody's body of work and kind of like see the through lines and see how it represents those specific artists. that's really what we're aiming to do. So thank you very much.
One thing that I definitely want to hit on, just because I think this is something you can, wave a flag in the air, that you were, to my knowledge, the first person to do this, is your ALM fan cams, which I think is super fascinating. And I'll let you probably describe it better, because I probably will not have the detail that you'd be able to, but basically you're, inviting fans to reach out to you on social, get to the venue really early, be the first in line with a disposable camera, and then you take that camera, and while you're roaming the venue, backstage with the band, around on stage, kind of getting your normal shots, you have this disposable that you can whip out and get some really unique photos. And a couple things that I find fascinating by that on my side is, one, I think it's a brilliant way to bring the fan along for the ride, but also protect it to some degree. And one thing that always comes to mind for me is, I remember, I don't know what year this was. I think it was 2011 or 2012. There was this tour, and I think it was My Chemical Romance, Blink 182 or something. And I don't remember who all was opening, but I was in the photo pit. There was like 3 or 4 other people, and My Chemical Romance had given away as a giveaway, like a photo pass to a random fan. And it was kind of this thing they were doing at every show. And so of course, all the photographers were all like, this will be interesting to see how this plays out, right? Like, this person doesn't have a professional camera. They've never been in a photo pit. Like, what's going to happen? And unfortunately did not play out all that well, because apparently she was like apt to get kind of panic attacks. She also, like, when the band came out, was so overwhelmed with being so close, because she wasn't used to it, that she was just like screaming from excitement, was not taking any photos, and was just standing in the middle of the pit, which we're all like, oh my God, like this impediment. It was just like worst case scenario, but it was like, I appreciate the band or whoever, maybe My Chemical Romance had nothing to do with it or the thought of it, but we appreciate the thought, but it's also like, maybe the execution wasn't great. So I think this idea, and I'll let you describe it better, is brilliant, because it kind of allows you to bring that fan with you, but also allows you to kind of keep them at arm's length a little bit, like you can kind of still protect what you're putting out.
Yeah. I mean, you got it. You got it right. That's exactly how it works. When did I start doing this? I want to say it was 2015 is when I first started doing it, and it started on a Walk the Moon tour. But I'd kind of seen something occurred that gave me the idea to make it into more of like a protocoled project. And I think I've seen this a few times before, but like a fan will try to get a camera to the band, or like you even see it today where like fans during a show on the front row will try to like hand their phone to the singer or whatever. And sometimes they'll take it. Sometimes they'll kind of like play into like the fun of it and just grab it and like take a selfie or like take a video of them on stage singing, which is like, just makes that fan's year. So anyway, I saw some version of that kind of happen with the disposable camera a long, long time ago. And I don't know, it just occurred to me as like, I could facilitate this somehow. And so I just, at the very beginning, it wasn't really like organized or planned out. I didn't have like instructions online like I do now, but I just posted on Instagram, like, hey, first one to bring me a disposable camera on show days on this tour, like I'll take it backstage, fill it up, and then give it back to you at the end of the show, which is still essentially what it is now. And I did it via Twitter so that there was, a timestamp on people's arrival, and, had them take a photo so that they could prove that they're actually first at the venue, and just little logistical things like that. But it was so well received. Like the band loved it. The fans absolutely loved it. And yeah, it was just like such a fun way to kind of treat them to like this little exclusive access, and something different than all of the tour content that I'm putting out or that the band is putting out from what I'm creating over the tour. It's like, I don't even know how these photos are turning out. And like, you're the only person that has these. And of course I encourage them to like post them and share. And, if they follow all the directions, and they're also emailing them to me at the end, so we can see how it turned out. And, we use it for content as well. But yeah, it's just such a fun little like almost like secret handshake between the band and me and the fan, and it's like a wink of like, these are yours, like it's a surprise when you get them developed. So it's so fun to see their excitement, especially like once they, the winner of the day, like once they get to the venue and like I'm able to confirm like, okay, you were the first person, like your camera wins, like I'm taking yours, and they're just over the moon. So it's I feel privileged to get to create that opportunity for them and like kind of witness the excitement around it. So I do it on most of the tours that I go on, and it's been really fun. Been around for over 5 years now.
How do you explain to kids how to develop film?
It's funny. It didn't occur to me until recently that I would have to start including instructions on how to do that, which, I mean, fortunately there is kind of like this wave of curiosity around film, and people have like point and shoots that they carry around for fun, or disposables or whatever. It's very cool still. So most people have an idea, but sometimes, they'll follow up with me and be like, okay, well, I just dropped it off to get developed. It's going to take like a week or two. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess there's other places around the country where like they literally have to mail it out. I mean, we're spoiled in LA where you can still go get like 1 hour photo developing or whatever. But I've started to include instructions on like, okay, if you've never developed film before, like some websites you can go to literally like ship it off if there's nowhere in your town that like develops film. So it's kind of funny. And it's unfortunately incredibly expensive now, just like the cameras are getting harder to find. So I hope that they don't completely go away. But it's all in all, it probably ends up being about a $30 investment to like buy the camera and get it developed and all that. But so I try to make it worth it.
That's still very cool though. What a great idea. I absolutely love it.
Is it a weird thing to take some photos and then hand it off to someone and being like, they may just not follow these instructions and I may never see these photos I got? Like, I don't know how much you might like repeat. Like, if you're whatever in a dressing room and you're snapping away, are you taking some with your DSLR and then also some with the disposable? Or are you kind of shooting and then you're like, you have to almost have this like detachment from it? Like, well, that could be really amazing. I may never see it again, but that's part of the whole game,
Yeah, that's a great question. And at first I was like, I felt very like married to these cameras and like a little protective of them. And I used to be better about kind of reinforcing like the final step is to email me, the files when you get them developed. And most of the time people will follow through with it. And then, you just have to detach from it a little bit. And anymore, like it's not a big deal. Like it's great to get them back just to have this like alternate like version of content that's like film and lo-fi and like not super precious, which is what's really great about it. But there's a lot of giving up of that control. But to also answer your question, I am duplicating some moments on digital and sometimes I'm not. It just depends on what it is. I mean, I'm capturing everything all the time anyway. So a lot of times it'll be that I took digitals of a moment first and I'm like, oh, let me also get this on the fan cam. And what has been interesting about the fan cam was like an effect that I didn't necessarily foresee is when I pull out the disposable to take a photo, like my subjects and like the artist and whoever's in the photo immediately just like loosens up that much more. They just kind of, it's almost like the permission to be silly. So they're behaving completely differently when I'm taking a photo with the disposable versus a digital. And that's been like such an interesting side effect of that. And almost to the point where like I've taken the disposable photo and now I'm like, okay, wait, but do that again for me. Like let me get a digital
you
of that.
hold the disposable up, but then you secretly are like shooting from the hip with your other camera.
Yeah. So it's so funny. And it's fun. And I appreciate it because then like the fan just gets all kind of like just silly moments and like the bands will take selfies with the camera and they're just willing to kind of like throw it away more, if that makes sense. Like throw away the moment and just like be fun.
Well, hey, it's been awesome talking to you, and I know we got to wrap things up here soon. But before I let you go, I want to talk to you a little bit about two things. Number one, how you got started in this business, right? Because I know you started as a fan in Oklahoma City, so that journey to actually say instead of not just being someone who likes to go to concerts and take pictures, but to actually make that your job. And then number two, with that same point, one of the things that I've noticed in this industry over the past couple of years is I'm seeing more and more females in the rock photography business or in the concert photography business. In fact, we had 321 Pilots shows, their hometown band here in Ohio. And on the third night, my entire group of photographers was all female. And it was so cool to see. It was the first time I've ever had, because usually it's that 53-year-old white guy who's been shooting rock shows forever. And he comes to every show and he's awesome. He's a great dude, right? But it's great. I'm seeing when the younger generation seems to be a lot more female-y predominant than where it's at. So I think there's a message there for people who are wanting to get into the business through hearing about your journey.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I'm very honored to be a representative of what is possible now. And it's interesting. The obstacles in that way for me were, it was like two different things kind of combined into one that I didn't realize until later on, just because at the beginning, like music photography and especially tour photography felt so inaccessible to me. Oklahoma City, it's not a big place. And it's certainly at the time, when I was there, wasn't a big music market at all. It's growing a lot and it's awesome, but everything was so regional and so local there. And, me and my friends, we were having a blast, like just being part of like the local music scene. And to me, that kind of felt like the ceiling. I just had no idea what the options even were. I knew so little about the industry beyond like what I knew of my local scene. But yeah, all of my friends were in bands and we went to local shows constantly. So I was just combining my enjoyment of photography with that hobby. So just spent a lot of time kind of honing my skills there in that market. And then eventually that kind of branched into me forming relationships with bands that would pass through town, and just shooting for them and like reaching out for photo passes and just having absolutely no idea like about the protocol around any of that. Just this kind of like innocent ignorance, which indirectly like served me well. I know that there's the journalism path. That's like a really common path for people as an access point to music photography. And there's a little bit more protocol around that. And there's more of an established industry there. So sometimes it's easier to get into music photography by following those steps because it like makes sense. And I just didn't know anything about any of that. So I was like reaching out to bands directly and management. And I was just like, okay, well, this makes sense, right? Because I want to take pictures for these people. So I should ask them directly. And sometimes it came through. Sometimes I got yeses, and just very, very slowly over time. I mean, it's very slow in those first couple of months and years to build that traction, but just built a few little relationships and maintained them. And to our point that we discussed earlier, that tends to snowball into those people kind of like validating you as a professional and being able to refer you. And at the very least, you kind of have the street cred associated with the portfolio of having shot national artists, which was a bit of a feat, living in a medium-sized Midwestern city. So that on one hand was part one of the obstacle. And then the other part, I suppose, being a woman trying to break into that industry, which I didn't really perceive as an obstacle at the time. I just thought the whole thing was really hard. It was just like, it's just, I have no connections. It's like impossible to get in. But I did run into a few situations where an artist specifically explained that they were hesitant to try me out on tour because they felt like it would be weird to have a female traveling with an essentially all male outfit. So I'm glad that that is something that's being overcome at this point, where they're not looking at it as an issue. They're looking at it as everyone's a professional and we're here to do a job. Like that, it's the mindset around it is changing, not to see the potential, I don't know, liability, I guess, is how they were viewing it at the time. And so I'm glad that we're, as an industry, getting past that mindset and looking at everyone as an equal opportunity professional that wants to serve the outcome of the tour. So yeah, that's kind of like a two-part obstacle that was all lumped into one for me at the beginning.
And representation matters so much too. You being in that photo pit, when you're touring around with this band and then you have all these super fans that are seeing you up there, that was you, before you started touring. So they're seeing, woman in the photo pit touring with these bands, and all of a sudden they think, oh, that could be me. If I have this love for that, that's really, that's a big deal too, because I'm sure a lot of people see themselves in you maybe more than that 65-year-old white-haired guy that is super nice but is kind of maybe not as relatable to the teenager that's in the crowd.
Sure, yeah. I've been incredibly just blown away and honored by the conversations I have had with a lot of the girls and the women that I encounter on tour, who say that it does mean a lot to them to see me and other, like my female peers, doing this job. And I think it's been so interesting, and I feel fortunate to kind of have watched this unfold over the last close to a decade. Like, it's so much change has happened so quickly in the last several years. So kind of seeing that whole thing unfold and like watching the rise of these people that, maybe early on I had a conversation with them at a concert, and then the next time I saw them, we're going through a show in Texas, I met them there, and the next time I see them, they're, they have a photo pass and then the photo pit, and then the next time I see them, they're like, oh, I'm going on tour with the band. So it's really cool to watch those stories unfold. And yeah, I'm grateful to participate.
Well, we are grateful to hear about your adventures. I know that you are definitely inspiring some folks listening today. Before we let you go, I want to hit you with our fast five quick questions. Just looking for your instant quick response.
Okay.
Up first, as a fan, what was your very first concert?
Oh, Reliant K.
Not an addict. All right. How about your favorite concert you've ever been to?
The 20th anniversary show of the Smashing Pumpkins in Chicago in 2008, something like that. Can't remember the year. It was amazing. It was like right after they'd gotten back together. I'm a super fan. And I never thought that I would ever get to see them live. So that was really cool. Hometown show.
If you could go back in time and shoot any one show, so you could shoot any artist, but one particular show, what is the show that you'd want to shoot?
Well, I guess we'll just ride off of my previous answer, and maybe the Pumpkin show at the Metro, their quote last show before they broke up.
How about your bucket list venue to shoot at? Is there a place that, obviously, you've been stadiums, you've been clubs, but what's a venue you haven't shot at yet that you would love to shoot a show at?
Oh, I'm not sure, to be honest. I've gotten to shoot at all of the ones I've been interested in my career. I'm not sure. There's probably just like new ones that are being built that are really nice. That's always that's always a dream come true, to get to a newly built venue somewhere in the Midwest that actually has dressing rooms and outlets aplenty and real showers.
You're asking a lot.
Yeah, Wi-Fi. I know, right? It's like, we always joke about there's three things that you need in a venue: a good shower, like desk space, and an outlet, and you get to pick two.
Very nice. I like that. Last question for you. What is the theme song to the TV show about your life? So there's the Anna Lee show where cameras follow you around all the time. What is the song that plays over the opening credits?
Oh no, you're asking me to be very creative in an area where I'm such a layman. It's funny. So I'm surrounded by music all the time, and I work in that industry, and I'm such a visual person. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh,
turn it back around on you.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I love the Pumpkins, so I think you could go with a Smashing Pumpkins song. That would be
today.
Really cool.
How about that? Smashing Pumpkins today. I'll just, from here on out, I'm labeling myself as the resident Smashing Pumpkins super fan.
So as a follow-up, have you shot a Pumpkin show?
I never have. And I think I'm okay with that. Like I would take the opportunity if it came along, but there's also something kind of nice about like leaving that separation between something I enjoy as a fan and like something that I've done as a job.
Yeah.
I'm okay with like leaving that mystery and that magic in place.
Well, the magic and mystery is something I love most about rock photography. And if people want to check out, your pictures, you've got some great stuff online. What's the best place for them to see your work?
Instagram is the thing that I update most often. So that's just Anna Lee Media. And my website, which is also recently overhauled. And so there's a lot of new stuff on there, annaleemedia.com. I'm Anna Lee Media across all platforms, so you can find me there.
Well, hopefully you get back on the road and get busy, as we all hope we do here again in the very near future. But we appreciate you making the time for us today. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for listening to this very cool episode of Adventures in Venueland. Remember, you can subscribe and find more episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We'd love your 5-star reviews, helps others find us. And until the next adventure, I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. Thanks for listening, everyone. Adventures in Venueland is a side project of the Event and Arena Marketing Conference, a nonprofit organization bringing together people in the field of live entertainment to discuss marketing, publicity, and sales trends. Find out more at eventarenamarketing.com.
Audio editing and mixing by Camille Faulkner.
Design and digital advertising by Megan Ebeck.
Copywriting and publicity by Samantha Marker.
Guest booking and brand strategies by Paul Hooper.
Guest research by Dave Rettelberger.
Marketing strategies by Paul Hooper, Megan Ebeck, and Samantha Marker. Thanks for joining us. Until the next adventure.